Well, we're back. Penguins hockey is officially on for this week. Tuesday, they have a big matchup against the Boston Bruins. Thursday, they go to Ottawa, take on the Senators for the final time this season. I have a big preview episode coming up right after this drop where the Penguins can hopefully get their first win in almost a decade against the Boston Bruins. Look for that coming up right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Penguins, as I said in my little opening monologue, they're back in action this week. They'll take on the Boston Bruins on Tuesday. I have a full preview for this game coming up a little later on in today's episode. We're also going to go into some potential lineup changes where it looks like that's going to happen tomorrow. And then just a couple other things as well. First off, though, the big news of the day on Monday, Evgeni Malkin has been placed in COVID protocol. He was one of the only players on the team that did not have COVID this year. There have been multiple players that have tested positive twice. Pretty sure Zach Aston-Reese is one of them. But Malkin was one of, I think, only one or three players that had not tested positive yet. You can scratch him off now. He was experiencing mild symptoms per Mike Sullivan on Monday, self-reported to trainer Chris Stewart, and then he has tested positive. So he is out until those symptoms go away. It does not look like this is an asymptomatic case. So I would say at this point, probably be out for maybe a week, but perhaps a bit more. Hopefully his symptoms aren't too bad. But, it really sucks for Gino because I thought he was getting better and better from each game. He's averaging already a point per game since coming back from his injury about a month ago. So, the Penguins have played without Malkin a lot this year, so they're experienced in that regard. I think, honestly, they're fine. But, they do face a big test in the Bruins. Again, I'm going to get to that later on. But there are also a couple players back at practice on Monday. Danton Heinen, he was a full participant after missing those 2 games before the All-Star break with a lower body injury. Mike Sullivan classified him as a game-time decision. In my opinion, he is going to play. Sully even said after practice, he was a full participant. He was participating in regular line rushes. So he is, he will be playing. As for those lines, Jake Gensel, Sidney Crosby, Brian Rust on the top line, that's not changing. Brock McGinn with Jeff Carter and Kasperi Kapanen. Danton Heinen with Evan Rodriguez and Radim Zohorna. Zach Aston-Reese, Brian Boyle, and Dominik Simon. And then Drew O'Connor was skating on the Wilkes-Barre line. He was back at practice today as well. He will not be playing tomorrow. He was a limited participant practice, but it's still good that, he's progressing back from his injury. Defensive corps, those were the same. June Letang, Pedersen, Marino, Matheson, Ruido. I saw some people on social media and a couple other places saying, it's big that Friedman is also skating on the second pairing. I really wouldn't read too much into that because I don't think Mike is going to scratch John Marino unless he truly does struggle at both ends of the rink. I know I have talked about, this on the podcast numerous times this year, but I still think until, more of his metrics start to go down a bit more, I don't think he's going to come out of the lineup. Sullivan has always been a fan of him. I just can't see it, at least in my opinion. But there were 2 big call-ups that we saw today from Wilkes-Barre, Michael Chaput and Valtteri Puustinen. So Puustinen by many is said to be the best prospect down there, and he's played pretty good. I should say, if I can get to the stats this year. On Wilkes-Barre's website, if I can do that here. Let me see here where Puustinen is at. So he this year, he actually has 13 goals and 27 points in 40 games. that leads Wilkes-Barre. He was a great player at training camp, from what I saw highlights wise, and from a lot of reporters that were at Cranberry and PPG Paints Arena saw. If I were the Mike Sullivan, I would play him, and here's why. We all know what Dom Simon brings to the lineup. He's fine possession wise, decent playmaker. Defensively, he's fine, but he's not going to score for you. It's just at this point in his career, if it didn't happen a few years ago, it's not going to happen now, and it hasn't happened. Puustinen, he is a scorer. As I just said, 13 goals in 40 games this year for Wilkes-Barre. And, he's one of those young guns that, he can make an impact if he comes into the lineup. I don't truly think this is a Mark Dong situation. I know a lot of people outside of Pittsburgh will say that, but, again, he is well regarded as perhaps the top prospect in the Penguin system outside of POJ. And I know that's not saying much. Trust me, I get it. The Penguins do not have a good farm system. It's ranked in the bottom 5 of the NHL. Year after year, that's the price you pay with winning 3 Stanley Cups with Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin. But I do want to see what this kid can do. I know he wasn't skating on one of the 4 lines in practice today. But again, as I just said, Simone, you know what he can do. Boyle, I guess I would keep him in lineup. He's been fine. Radim Zohorna, I want to see what he can do as well. Though if you honestly scratch Zohorna for Puustinen, I don't really think a lot of people would care that much. That's just at least my opinion. But he's always had a heck of a shot. He's really fast, good two-way game, good playmaker. Why not? I think at this point, you're on a 4-game losing streak. You should honestly try to, bring out all the shots to end that losing streak. I know the team is basically a lock to get in the playoffs. It's per Money Puck this morning. It was like 99.6%. I mean, unless there's a team that goes on a massive run that's below them, they will be in the playoffs come late April, early May. But, I'm still pretty intrigued and excited by this player. I really hope Mike potentially, puts him into a game for as long as he's up here because, Malkin's probably, as I just said, he's only going to be out for a week, probably less than 10 days. But they still have, a few games during that span. They should put him in, have him make his NHL debut and see what the kid can do. Chaput, I don't really know too much about him this year. If I can find his stats here. 3 goals, 12 points in 25 games. So he hasn't done too much for Wilkes-Barre this season, but he was one of the other call-ups. I don't think he's going to get into a game. If Mike were to put him in the lineup over Puustinen, I think there will be a problem. That's for sure. But, I want to see some more younger energy into this lineup. I know that sounds weird to say just because of how good this team has been this year, but, he's a player that I think, a lot of people in the fan base are intrigued about, especially King Clarkey of Penguins Twitter, who's always in my DMs about him, just, sending me highlights and all this stuff. So, I definitely know that would make at least one Penguins fan happy, but probably a whole bunch of others as well. I know he will probably only get 3rd, 4th, most likely 4th line minutes, I should say. But, at the end of the day, I think at this point, he's a better option than a couple of the forwards that are going to be in the lineup tomorrow night. So we'll have to see if Sullivan goes against the practice lineup that we saw today. But as of right now, it's looking like the lineup that I just read out is going to be your lineup against the Bruins. And of course, Tristan Jarry is likely going to start that game. It's good that he had a week off. I know he had to play in the AllStar game. He played pretty well, honestly, overall. I think in that last game, or the 2 games combined, 14 out of 15 shots he faced, 14 saves. So, or that might have been just the last game, I believe is what it was. So he was one of the best goalies of the All-Star game. I saw these weird takes over the weekend from other fan bases saying that Tristan didn't deserve to be there. Shesterkin should have. And, I understand that. I get Shesterkin's probably going to win the Vezina this year, but he was not the Rangers representative. That went to Chris Kreider, who was having a Rocket Richard type season. And I get that he didn't, Shesterkin didn't get in, during like the fan voting and, the last couple of players in and all that. But Tristan still deserved to be there. He's been one of the 10 best goalies in hockey this year. One of definitely the 3 best goalies in the Eastern Conference, at least in my opinion. So, to see this weird nonsense from other fan bases, just ignore it. People will move the goalposts. I try not to get myself suckered into it too much, though, some people definitely try to get me to do that. That's for sure. But Coming up in the next segment, we're going to do a full preview for the game against Boston on Tuesday, going to their lines. This is a game that I really think it's just going to be a tough one to win, just because the Penguins, for whatever reason, they stink up at TD Garden. But before we get to that, this is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, and they're all so good. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie, high protein, and you can replace your candy bars with these as well. They're better than candy bars. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, but the trick with Built Bar is most of them are 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, and they are 17 grams of protein. There's so many great flavors with mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. I'm going to have to get my hands on one of those. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. You can go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, welcome back to this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow this show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So, again, Penguins will be playing the Boston Bruins for the first time this season. Of course, it is at TD Garden, and I'm trying to find here the last time the Penguins I'm just trying to figure this out here. Well, I'll do this in a second. There is good news, at least for the Penguins with this. There will be no Tuukka Rask. Yeah, so he will be out all week, according to Bruce Cassidy. Definitely something that I didn't see coming. I thought he was back healthy, but it will be Jeremy Swayman for the Bruins on Tuesday. Will not be Linus Ullmark. So that's again that's a big deal. Swayman's been good this year. Don't get me wrong, but it's still not having to face Tuukka Rask. Is a pretty big deal, at least in my opinion. As for the lines, Bergeron with Marchand and Craig Smith, it is weird that they're not icing, the so-called best line in hockey, which I think it is, Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, that are putting Pastrnak on the second line with Tomas Nosek and Taylor Hall. I think if they're struggling in this game, they'll just flip-flop Craig Smith and David Pastrnak. They will have no problem doing that. Jake DeBrusk with Charlie Coyle on the third line. Curtis Lazar on the fourth line defensively. Charlie McAvoy with Matt Grzelcyk. I think that's one of the better top pairs in hockey. I love watching McAvoy play, the way he moves the puck. He's just so methodical with it, and he can fake you out in an instant, has a bomb of a shot from the point, great playmaking ability, and he's also ridiculously good in his own zone. Mike Riley with Brandon Carlo. I really think the Bruins missed Carlo a lot last year. Remember, he didn't play too much in the playoffs or towards the end of the regular season. I think he had some concussion issues. I think one of them was due to a massive hit by Tom Wilson. This is a player that, he means more to them than I think, some people, say. So glad to see him back in the lineup. And I also will say this, that is my mistake. They actually beat the Bruins in Boston earlier in April of last year. It was 4-1. That was their first win in Boston since 2013-2014. If I recall correctly, Lee Stefaniak had the game-winning goal in that game. There's a nice little throwback for you all right there. Lee frickin' Stefaniak, of course, who was acquired by Ray Shero I believe that was my junior year of high school. That was the year they beat Columbus in the first round and then blew the 3-1 lead to the Rangers in the second round. I'll always say, that's one of the biggest what ifs right there in Penguins history. If they go on to win that series, who knows what happens with this team? Again, that's a discussion I think for another day. Derek Forbort is on their bottom pairing. As for their underlying numbers, they have 56% of the expected goals this year per money puck, 49.7% of the actual goals. So they're not finishing their chances as well. That also goes show with their goal differential -1 this year. So Definitely not as good as in years past. They have 53% of the shot attempts at 5v5, scoring on over a little bit more per money puck. So goals for per 62.4. Their goals against per 62.43. So pretty similar in that regard. Their expected goals for per 60 is 2.555. So their actual goals against, they're outperforming that. Um, Actually, no, excuse me. Their expected goals for is 2.55. Their goals for is 2.4. So they're underperforming there, but they're also underperforming, I think, with their goals against 2.43, but their expected goals against is 2.05. This has always been a strong defensive team. But I think the biggest thing with Boston is, I like their lineup, but can they go toe to toe with a team like Tampa or Florida? And I just don't think they can. I mean, we all saw last year, remember, they crushed the Washington Capitals in the first round, right? But then the Islanders just, flat out bullied them in the second round, beat them in 5 or 6 games. And I know the Bruins kind of outplayed them. It was a little similar to how the Penguins did. I would say the Penguins outplayed the Islanders a lot more, just looking at the underlying numbers in that series. But that was still, I think, a series that the Bruins should have won. I thought Tuukka Rask played as well as he could have. I know he was battling an injury. It was just, the Islanders goaltending was that was, I think, the main difference again. And they were also getting scoring from all over the lineup. But as I look at the standings today, the Bruins come into this game 26-14-3, so 55 points. They're 8 points behind the Maple Leafs. They're 11 points behind the Lightning, 14 points behind the Panthers. So, it's looking very, very likely, I should say, that they're going to finish fourth in the Atlantic, and they will probably draw Florida in the first round. That's not good. I mean, I know they have a lot of firepower. David Pastrnak's getting really hot. I love Patrice Bergeron. He's one of the best players of this generation. Brad Marchand, I mean, he's ridiculous. Taylor Hall can turn it on in an instant. Charlie McAvoy. If Tuukka Rask stays healthy, who knows what can happen. But I think at this time, they're one of the lower fringe contenders. And it's going to be unfortunate when, likely, I mean, if I get old takes exposed or I get old takes exposed, it's going to be, unfortunate when, Bergeron probably retires with only one Stanley Cup. And same with Marchand's day. I think it's too early to say with Pastrnak because they drafted him while Bergeron and Marchand were in their primes. But, it's still unfortunate just because, they've always been a perennial contender, for a long time. But, the Bruins also have 3 games in hand on the Penguins, though. That said, the Penguins are 7 points ahead of them. But I always love when these two teams play, especially, even if it's in TD Garden, the games are always fun. Again, I apologize for being, definitely a bit wrong about, the Penguins breaking their winless streak in Boston. I thought that was still ongoing. I thought that 4-1 win was in Pittsburgh. Turns out, I don't get everything right. I'm not a genius all the time. I try to be, the best expert I can be with this team. But, sometimes, I fall flat on my face and I look like a complete moron as I did just there. So, overall, though, excited to watch this one. And we will see what the Penguins can do. The vibe check, as Jesse Marshall says. Let's see how they come out in forecheck in the first 5 to 10 minutes. If the Penguins are forechecking with authority and they're playing sound defensive hockey, 90% of the time, which way that's going to go. It's going to go in their favor. Now, if they come out and don't look good and, they're getting bullied, up and down the rank, then I'm definitely going to be a little concerned moving forward, for the rest of that game. But that'll do it for this segment. Before we get to our next segment, BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple of weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline is up-to-the-minute info on the pro and college hoop scene, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live, real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, welcome back here to this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter, LA_Penguins. A couple quick AllStar Game thoughts. I didn't, talk about the AllStar Game just in general after watching it, just because, that game was the day on the weekend. Of course, I don't do shows on Saturdays, but it was fun to see just the players having a good time there. Jake Gensel had a couple really gorgeous feeds during that game. Claude Giroux also had a heck of a feed to Jake Gensel. And, maybe I'll get a little heat for this. I tweeted this on my Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I'll say it here for you all as well. Wouldn't it be kind of chaotic and fun if Claude Giroux was threading passes to Jake Gensel about a month and a half from now? Yes, I understand. That's probably not going to happen. I don't think Ron Hextall is going to trade with his former team. These two teams hardly ever trade with each other. The only one that they did that I can remember was the Mark Streit one in 2017, where Hextall, who was the Flyers GM at the time, he traded Streit to Tampa, who then had to trade him to Pittsburgh because they were not going to do that trade together. It's like, the Steelers and the Ravens or something agreeing to a trade, or the Steelers and the Browns. It's not going to happen. But, my sick, chaotic mind would love nothing more than to see Claude Giroux threading passes to Jake Gensel on the Penguins. Just injected into my veins. It would make all bunch of Flyers fans so mad online. And, just watching the reaction, I think, from Penguins fans as well. Just, give it to me. Hopefully that is the highlight of this episode of this podcast. But I loved what Jake was doing. Just again, he had some really nice goals, some great passes as well. Jari was making a lot of, pretty good. I shouldn't even say pretty good saves, because the effort in these All-Star games is really, I shouldn't say it's non-existent, because there definitely is some effort there, but it is, there's a little bit of effort. I should say, he was actually making, at least a half effort to make some saves, and I thought he played pretty well. In the 3-on-3 overtime. Again, I'm not going to get into people saying that he didn't deserve to be there. That's just a bunch of hogwash to me. And this got me thinking, after watching the Pro Bowl on Sunday, a little bit of it, which, I would rather watch my water boil for pasta than watch the Pro Bowl. I was thinking about this, just ranking the top All-Star games among the four major sports. The NFL is obviously at last. I mean, that was basically two-hand touch. That's how big of a joke it was watching that game, and no one even takes it serious. You see guys taking selfies on the sideline. I mean, they're not playing to, hit stick anyone. And obviously, back in the day, it was a little bit different when Sean Taylor, may he rest in peace, was just decking people in the Pro Bowl, everything. He laid out some massive hits, when he was doing his thing. I would probably have the NBA at third. Theirs used to be, I think, top two, but with how their dunk contest has gone down recently, and, their game, I don't really think it's, deserving of being in the top two. I would have the NHLs at number two. So for as much as this sport gets wrong league-wise, I guess I should say, they definitely get the All-Star game right. And the move to 3-on-3, I think, really saved it, because, I mean, did anyone really watch when the game was, 4-on-4, 5-on-5 or whatever? No, I mean, it was kind of boring because you didn't see as much scoring. Now with these, where you see, two, 10 to 20 minute periods, and the games are over pretty quickly, it's up and down action, and there's a 2-on-1 basically every freaking shift. I mean, that's what's going to hook a casual fan into the game of hockey. No one wants to see you trapping the All-Star game or see, more skaters on the ice. They want to see the best of the best go at it 3-on-3, just like you do in overtime in the regular season, and I'm glad the NHL made that change when they did 6 years ago. Baseball, I would have it number one. The best thing, they did was, whoever won the game would get home field advantage in the World Series. That's how you get some incentive into the All-Star game, where some players try harder than others, again, compared to the Pro Bowl and stuff, because, the team, for players that are on that team that know that the regular team is in the playoff chase, and you're chasing a pennant and all that, you want to get the best record so you can have home field for the World Series. If the NHL did something like that for home ice in the Stanley Cup final, no matter what happens, it would be a little interesting, but I also think it would kind of deem the regular season a little irrelevant. But, baseball, they were doing it for so long, and I think they still do it, or they did it last time I checked. They might have changed it. But, the home run derby, they knocked that out of the park. And again, the game is like actually it's competitive. Sure, there's some players joking around and all that stuff, but I would say it's the most competitive of all of the four major sports All-Star games. NHL is right behind that. So just wanted to spend a little bit of my last segment touching on that, just because, I was thinking about that, while watching some of the Pro Bowl, and then of course while watching the All-Star game this past Saturday. But that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I really appreciate all of you listening to this one. I'll be back on Tuesday evening for a full game recap for the Penguins versus the Bruins. And then, we'll have a full preview for the game on Thursday in Ottawa. So hope you have a great rest of your evening. And if you're listening to this on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, I will see you all in a few hours for a full game recap for the Penguins-Bruins matchup.